I joined in Victoria, BC in 1971, and we started a temple in Edmonton where I received my initiation letter from Srila Prabhupada in 1972. And I first saw Srila Prabhupada we closed the temple and moved back to Vancouver, and then we traveled down to Portland, Oregon in June of 1972 I sat in with a fire sacrifice. And at that time, I'd already had my initiation, but I was very tired. I had to actually stand up for the whole thing. But during the fire sacrifice, I remember one point that there was a young lady that we had in the Vancouver temple. She was just 17, and she was very nervous. And when Srila Prabhupada asked everyone what the 4 regular principles were and how many rounds a day do you chant. But with this girl, she couldn't remember the 4 regular principles. She said, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and chant Hare Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada said, all right, next. And what I realized from the instance where Srila Prabhupada forgave the young devotee from not knowing the four regular principles and didn't even ask her how many rounds a day she chanted, is that Prabhupada knew his devotees were very young and inexperienced and nervous. He was always very easygoing with the devotees, and he knew our hearts because he could see he was taking all the right disciples. Finally, we got to the point where we come to before the spiritual master. He was taking us and beginning us on our journey back to Godhead.
But the first time I saw him was in 73 or 4, and I don't remember a lot because I was a brahmachari, came over from Kauai, where I was a brahmachari, and I didn't have a lot of money, and I was 23 years old. I wasn't really, we had been studying Bhagavad Gita, but anyway, so when I went to see Srila Prabhupada, he was giving a cooking class, and it was maybe 5 or 6 people in the kitchen, and Srila Prabhupada, I walked in, and he was in the midst of making samosa. So the thing that really stuck out in my mind was Prabhupada was emphasizing the point that you don't use water when you make the samosa. You only mix flour and butter to make the dough. And I found out later on that you have to, I had to add a tablespoon of water, but not much. He was emphasizing and mixing, and he finally had another brahmachari take over to mix the butter and the flour, no water, just butter and flour. So that was a very unique thing that how Prabhupada did not want water in the samosas, just butter and flour.
1975, summer of 1975, Srila Prabhupada visited Toronto at the George Street Temple. And the first time I saw him was we were standing inside the lobby of the building. It was a very small lobby with a narrow hallway. And he walked through the door, because he was staying at another location, so he walked through the door. And as he walked by, as several devotees have said, their first impression was, wow, that they were surprised by his stature, because they expected him to be very tall. And similarly, I had expected him to be very tall. But he walked very, was very upright and with his chin held high, and he exuded an aura of confidence, and I could see that he walked the walk. He lived the life of what he preached, and it wasn't just talk, but he walked the walk, and that was very confidence-provoking, because so many other swamis had come to the West and were not that way.
Well, I was in Buffalo, New York. I was very interested through transcendental meditation, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I played in a rock band. And after seeing the Back to Godhead magazine, my barber gave me 3 Back to Godhead magazines and a Bhagavad Gita. I saw Vishnu Jan Swami playing the mridanga, everyone chanting and dancing. They said, come and join the transcendental party, feasting, dancing, and music. And I thought, wow, this is cool, because I'm a drummer, I like music, and it sounds very interesting. So we went to the temple in Toronto, I went to the temple in Buffalo, chanting Krishna's name, listening to Govinda prayers all the time. My friend was a psychologist, and when we drove down to, we were going to different temples. We drove down to Washington, D.C. And we were just in downtown, the monuments, and one devotee came to us, Sankirtan devotee, and said, hey, why don't you come to the Potomac, our temple in Potomac? Our Guru Maharaj is coming, So I thought, wow, this is incredible, I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, reading Back to Godhead magazine, and the whole chanting, and it was very mystical. And so we went to Potomac Temple, and we're cleaning the bathrooms and getting ready for the exciting moment. Prabhupada's coming, so everyone's just got busy, working hard to prepare everything for the temple and the festival, decorations and everything like that. So when Prabhupada arrived, Rupanuga, I think, was his secretary, they got out of the car, and I remember seeing Prabhupada walking from the car, going towards the temple. Many people have experienced this before, but he was definitely above the ground. He was floating and walking, very straight, very majestically and very regal. And I just felt very, I didn't expect the Prabhupada. He seemed short, small in stature, but he seemed so powerful. And that was my first time actually seeing Prabhupada physically in Washington, D.C. Then we went to the temple room for the kirtan and did the program that evening.
In 1976, when Srila Prabhupada came to Potomac, there was a young man, and he was maybe in his 30s, and he would move into the temple, stay for a few months, and then move out. Move in, move out. And we would try to cajole him, try to say that, you're so close to entering the threshold of bhakti, if you can just stick it out through these first difficult months. Maya is definitely testing you. You can go back home to Godhead. That's what we're all promised. So we would speak like that to him, and nothing seemed to work. So at the end of a Bhagavatam class in the morning, it was, of course, everyone knows it was customary to ask questions. So he puts up his hand, and he said, how do you deal with skepticism? And everybody was so happy, because this sort of really encapsulated his issue, because he wasn't steady. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, I don't know if he referred to His Divine Grace by his name, but he said his question was, how do you deal with skepticism? To the happiness of everybody in the temple. And Srila Prabhupada said, skepticism means rascalism. And there was a hush over the entire temple room. And then he said, and we cannot deal with rascals. So in 2 sentences, Srila Prabhupada accomplished what we couldn't do in months and months and hours and so much effort on our part. He was empowered to speak on behalf of the Supreme Lord directly. He was the message carrier, and he delivered the message without any filter. And that was a very strong moment. I don't think anybody was expecting that response.
I was taken over to the BBT offices and shown the room where the composing machines were. And actually I started right away. The marathon was on. It was quite an amazing work of team effort as far as the whole community goes. Rameswar Prabhu he organized, well, in my case, someone did my laundry, someone brought prasadam to me. I didn't have to think about any of my needs. They were all taken care of. All I had to do was go to Mangalartik and basically type and chant my rounds. So that's what I did, and it was just so ecstatic. Typing these pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and knowing that for the first time in history, we are instruments in broadcasting Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in the English language by Prabhupada's mercy, you know. So, and these pastimes were just filled with wonderful, you say bhav, you know, that we didn't necessarily get from the Krishna book, you know, this was even special. So I made a point of taking excerpts from what I was typing, just little excerpts that I thought were real jewels, you know, and to share it with somebody at Mangalarti. I had to do that, you know, I didn't want to keep it to myself. In any case, Prabhupada did come on a tour of the offices, the rooms, and he stood by my side and he said, "I dreamt of this in Vrindavan." As I thought about it later, I thought I could only speculate that he meant his books will be published with the latest technology. It was Mahamaya and myself back in Brooklyn days that we were sent to Manhattan to learn the Redactron composing machine. For a couple weeks there, we had to keep going. So that's all. That was one little connection. I was just sitting there. I stopped typing while he was just standing there, of course, you know. But we kept going once he moved out of that room, you know.
I was in Mexico City, and I got to see him in national television too, in the TV program, news program, famous all over the country. You're talking about millions of people get to see him, you know, because we used to go later, because Prabhupada gave a kirtan and lecture with some devotees, and the news reporter, very famous, Jacobo Saludowski. So he asked, "Swami, can you please give your blessings to the Mexican people?" I said, "Yes, all the people in Mexico City are my blessings." So after that, when we go out, you know, Harinam or distributing books, all the people were saying, "Yes, I see you go on TV. I see the Swami on TV. Give me one book. Give me one book." So it's like a Prabhupada facilitated Sankirtan, you know, like he is the one distributing the books. We were just giving it to people. It was so easy, you know, in those days.
During the class in Gita Nagari, I can only remember Prabhupada saying how I know he felt that if he knew how nice it was in Gita Nagari, he would have stayed longer. And his room smelled like paint because, you know, wherever he went, they freshened up the room painting. But the one thing I remember from the class is Prabhupada said, you should take the milk, because we had surplus milk, and they were distributing milk at that time in the big milk jugs to different temples. I know we were getting it in Baltimore and Washington, and I think Boston. And but Prabhupada said you should dry the milk. You should dry the milk and give the milk to other temples. They had a good sized herd of brown Swiss. They were all brown Swiss. They gave a lot of milk. That indicated to me that Prabhupada, he didn't want anything to go to waste. That was for sure. And he wanted to see how we could have our own self-sufficiency as much as possible, and be very practical. And at the farm there in Gita Nagari, the prasad there was wonderful, and all the prasad came from the garden, their own garden. They were kind of out in the country, and that was the best prasad you can imagine, and their own cow milk. And it was very nice. And so Prabhupada wanted us to steer in that direction.
Okay, so later in June of 1975, Srila Prabhupada came to Denver for 6 days, and until July 3rd, and he was to stay in the we had a nice unfurnished apartment right across the street from the temple. Srila Prabhupada, first of all, we picked him up at the airport. We rented a nice town car, and Srila Prabhupada had a press conference, but nobody came. Srila Prabhupada took a little fruit and then went to his car, but the car broke down, and Srila Prabhupada arrived at the Denver temple in the old beat-up Sangadan van. And they threw flowers and everything, and I assisted in the foot bathing ceremony of Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada gave a small talk, and then he went over across the street to his apartment that we had just moved downstairs. And Srila Prabhupada, first thing he did when he walked in, there's a little office area, like a little sunroom in the front. We put a low desk there, but Prabhupada immediately said, "Where are the locks?" He said, "These cabinets, these drawers, they must all have locks." So one man was immediately sent out to buy locks at the hardware store. And Srila Prabhupada settled down to do his letter writing, etc. And Nanda Kumar and went to cook, and Paramahansa Swami and Parivraja Acharya were working in the other room. And I stayed most of the time. Whenever I had a chance, I would hang around just watching Srila Prabhupada. And I was standing right across from Srila Prabhupada's doorway and watching him. And Devi Das, the temple president's wife, came by, and as she passed me, Srila Prabhupada called out, "Don't bother, they're not fresh." So she stopped in her tracks and she said to me that I was just thinking in my mind that I had put some strawberries in the fridge. I thought, I'll go make a preparation. But Srila Prabhupada knew they weren't fresh. So Srila Prabhupada could often read the devotees' minds like this. And then Nanda Kumar came in with Srila Prabhupada's lunch plate, and even before he sat down at the table, Srila Prabhupada said, without looking up, he said, "The rice is too cold. Cold rice is terrible." And Nanda Kumar said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Srila Prabhupada, I'll take it to the kitchen, and I'll warm it up and bring it back." And so he says, "Warned over rice is poison. Never mind, tomorrow I'll cook my own lunch." So Srila Prabhupada took the lunch plate without rice. But next day we all gathered around the sannyasis, and his staff and myself went to the kitchen there, and Srila Prabhupada showed how he cooks lunch. He said that in India, every gentleman knows how to cook his own lunch. And Srila Prabhupada made a little ball of chapati dough and set it aside, and then he put the three-fold tiffin with a little water and dal on the bottom and some vegetables in the center, and the rice cooking on the top with steam, and set it aside and made the chapatis. And he said that 3 things will happen if you cook your own lunch. He said you'll eat it all, it'll taste very delicious, and you will never get sick. And Srila Prabhupada was finished in 20 minutes. He poured out the rice with all steaming hot, and he made a few quick chapatis and went off to his room to eat it. So that was a very nice pastime of Srila Prabhupada giving us a cooking lesson.
And then about 5 weeks later, we were in Denver, and there Prabhupada was there. And I was really a raw recruit. I mean, I was very kind of just dazed by the new experience of Krishna consciousness. So I still remember, this is recorded in my mind. I'm in the temple room, it's full, and Prabhupada's coming back from his morning walk. And at the end of the hall, at the end of the temple, there's a door, and he comes in, and I see him surrounded by the sannyasis who are on the walk. And you've heard this before from other people. He glowed, he was floating. And I said, "Oh my God, he's my spiritual master." I could tell at that moment he was, I mean, it was like he's the person in the books come alive. And he came by me, and he flashed his glance at me, and I don't know if it was at me, but I thought it's for me. And I was thinking, I've met my guru. This is my guru. And I remember he went down and he sat down on the Vyasasana, and he started the lecture. And because I had never heard him speak, I couldn't understand anything. But I just felt so blessed to be able to be there and to hear Srila Prabhupada. So that was a very quick memory, and at that point, Prabhupada, he was there for a few days, and we went to some classes, and then he was off someplace else, and we were off someplace else with Vishnu John and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. But 2 weeks later, we were in Chicago for the huge initiation ceremony. It was the biggest one ever, I think, at NISCON at that time. And so many of us were going to be initiated, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj came up to me and said, "You're going to get initiated." I said, "Am I ready, Maharaj?" He said, "You're ready. Prabhupada is so merciful. You're ready." I said, "Okay, I'll do it. It's wonderful." So the day of the initiation came, and I remember just sitting there, and Prabhupada was asking each person, the four regulated principles and giving their beads, asking their name. Finally, my turn came, and I was so in awe of Prabhupada, I forgot everything. I just sat there and looked at him. What are the four regulated principles? And I forgot. And eventually, I went through 1, 2, and no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and I couldn't remember no gambling. Oh, no gambling! And then Prabhupada was chanting on the beads, and he was ready to hand me the beads, but I put my left hand out, and I was told, "No, right hand." So finally I reached my right hand out, and he in a very royal sort of way, hands me the beads, and he goes, "Your name is Drishta Das. That is, servant of the one who sees Krishna everywhere." And everybody goes, "Jai!" And I said, Drishta. How do you? I didn't even know how to spell it. So afterwards, I went to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and said, "Can you write that down?" And he said he wrote it down for me. And to this day, I feel that what Prabhupada gave me that name was, it's servant of Prabhupada, because he's the one who sees Krishna everywhere. And therefore, that name, Drishta Das, that he gave me, I held in my heart for the next year whenever I had any difficulty in Krishna consciousness, which sometimes I did, thinking, can I really do this? I would remember Prabhupada said, Drishta Das, servant of one who sees Krishna everywhere. And I thought, yes, I'm eternally connected to my Gurudev, and therefore I'm always going to be a devotee of my Gurudev.
So in Atlanta, we heard Srila Prabhupada was going to be in Atlanta, so we thought, hey, let's go, why not? And we got there a few days early, so we were able to help out. Now there was, I swear, 10 million brahmacharis there. I found out later it was all the Radha Damodar buses. I didn't know that at the time, but there was 10 million brahmacharis. So if you're a woman, the chances of getting close to Srila Prabhupada was practically zero. But we did find the window right beside the Vyasasan outside, so we got to stand there just feet away from Srila Prabhupada when he was offering the Artik to Bhaktisiddhanta. Later on, I remember being in a kirtan. I don't remember which kirtan it was. I'm thinking it was either a Guru Puja or maybe the Sunday Feast kirtan that was before when they had the play. But I noticed in the kirtan, you're always watching Srila Prabhupada. Don't remember who was leading the kirtan, but I remember Srila Prabhupada was looking around the room. And this room is packed. It's smaller than it is today. There was a wall and a fireplace, so that it's a lot smaller, and you had devotees sitting on the floor and devotees on their knees and the devotees standing up and the devotees standing on the windowsill. I mean, it was really packed. He was looking around the room at every single devotee, going from face to face to face to face. And then he started getting on the side of the room that I was on. And I thought, Srila Prabhupada's going to look at me. And I had heard about Prabhupada looking at you and how profound it is, although it really wasn't discussed that much, but people mentioned it every now and then.
And I thought, well, what do I do? Do I look back? Do I look away? What should I do? And then I realized he's looking at the person next to me. And it's funny, I could feel him looking at the person next to me. It was like being in a spotlight. And then it's like he's looking at me, and it's like time stand still. And you know, Srila Prabhupada is seeing every little bit of your karma for millions of lifetimes. And it was the strangest experience. It was almost like I was looking at myself and he was looking at me, but it was just for a second or two, and then it's like, oh, he's looking at the person next to me now. But you could still, it was like being in the effulgence of his gaze until he looked away at another person, and then he just continued looking at all the people in the room, one by one. He looked at every single person, and I've never heard anybody else mention that for that time.
When Prabhupada came to Venezuela, the woman, we were in the back. So I have a picture, my head is there, this much. But we were in the back, but still, because I was a guest, I came inside and sat with the guests, and Srila Prabhupada looked at everybody, and I was sari, everything, but very punk-looking, big eyelashes. And Prabhupada looked around, and then he came back. And he just stared at me, and I felt weird, but then I felt like, okay, it's okay, I'm okay, because he's telling me it's okay. But at the same time, I was with black nail polish and lipstick, but that look of kindness saying, I was just 16. So that helped I actually was more attached to my friends' beliefs, and I knew what they're doing was right. So I follow. And because they loved Srila Prabhupada so much. You know, there's Pramanadas, Virahu, the sannyasis then, Havidas, Tamoha. We were family, and it was so sweet, the mood of Srila Prabhupada with them, that's what I loved of Krishna consciousness. That's what I knew, that's why I started learning about Srila Prabhupada. This is the cleanliness, whoa. This is the kindness, it's like, oh, this is nice. This is the way we have to be happy. Wow, this man knows what he's saying. But I knew that because of people like you and my god brothers and my god sisters they're so attached to Srila Prabhupada, and I'm also attached. But I feel like, you know, when you roller skating, I'm sure you have roller skating, everybody holding hands like a big line, I'm the last one. And for some reason, that look of Srila Prabhupada and that kindness of his self, I'm the last one skating, and the last one is the one who gets bumped and goes the faster. You're going fast, so you better keep on those skates. And I thank all the devotees of Srila Prabhupada's movement that we all stick together and stay together and be here for each other. Okay?
Somehow or other, the devotees came and got me from where I was because I was not feeling very worthy. And so they tracked me down and said, you know, it's time for you to get second initiation. So I said, okay, it's confirmed. So I went to Prabhupada's quarters there in Chicago. This is the Evanston, the YMCA. Everybody was walking around, and Sudama Maharaj, you know, prepared me and had me take my, you know, kurta off and all those different things. So then I went in and saw Srila Prabhupada, and, you know, offered obeisances, and I had nothing to say, didn't ask any questions. I was just, I suppose, I was just overawed by my spiritual master. He didn't need to hear anything from me. So I think I already had the thread on. And then Prabhupada spoke the mantra to me. And then first of all, he asked me to show him how to count on my fingers. And I became completely confused and did it all wrong. He slapped my hand, which I took as a great mercy. And one can't be too foolish before one's spiritual master. So he didn't say anything to me except Gayatri mantra. And I didn't really say anything except offer my obeisances, because everything is revealed at that point. There's nothing left to be said. And that was second initiation.
We did the Guru Puja, got our cookie, and we were all sitting and listening to Prabhupada lecture, and he was speaking Sanatana Goswami and about different stages of realization, how to actually achieve the absolute truth or the perfection of life. And my friend Mark, we were both into transcendental meditation, he thought we also met, what's his name? Very good friend of mine, but I forgot his name. He was a secretary for Maharaji Mahesh Yogi, and many of the devotees who were looking for something higher, something more, they said that Maharaji said, if you really want the highest in the essence, you go see Bhaktivedanta Swami and take this process. Take this process. That's what I've heard. But anyway, my friend Mark, he asked a question that is this mantra that's being given by transcendental meditation something like something new and more, something powerful, like a quick way of achieving the self-realization or higher consciousness, because they were really promoting the consciousness, expanding consciousness, becoming more powerful, more aware, and whatnot. And Prabhupada explained about the staircase, that you can take the staircase up and up and up, go 100 floors, and by the time you get to the top, the day is finished and all the stores are closed. Or you can get in the elevator and go straight to the top. And this process of Krishna consciousness is authentic process, and the chanting of the Maha Mantra is inclusive of all the mantras that transcendental meditation has, but it's much more comprehensive and much more in depth.
So during that visit in 1975, there was a home program at one of the congregational members. It was a small program with some Western devotees and some of the Indian congregational members. So in that meeting, Srila Prabhupada was standing, greeting everybody in front of his sofa where he was going to sit. And you know how Indians always like to touch Prabhupada's feet, so there were several Indians lined up. And I thought, you know, I should join that line too. So I got to the end of that line. I was the last one on that line. And when it came to my turn, I put my head on his feet, and then I thought I have to do something else. Because I don't know if I'll ever get this opportunity again. So I kissed his feet, and then I kissed his cane, and then I did it again, and then I did it again for the third time. And I was hesitant to get up, but then I did get up, and with a very nervous smile, and sat down, but he was looking straight at me, eye to eye, and I felt like he could see through me to my soul, and he could see the desires, feel the desires that I had in my heart for him to be my eternal father, to be his daughter, and I couldn't really come out and do it publicly because there were restrictions at that time for me. So I felt his compassion. You know, he could have pulled his foot away. He could have, kicked me. He could have said something when I stood up, but he just gazed at me. A real deep gaze, and I felt that he was being so kind and compassionate and could understand my situation. So I've lived with that in my heart all these years.
So after my initiation, fire sacrifice, which was the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada, about 9 months after I joined. I was in Portland there in '72, and after the whole ceremony and lecture, Srila Prabhupada was gingerly getting off the Vyasasana, and everyone parted to leave a big path down the center of the room. And those days, people used to chant the Prabhupada pranam mantras loudly and slowly and in unison. So everybody else had their heads down and chanting the Prabhupada mantra, and except for me, I sat back on my heels, and I was thinking that I really should. I read someplace that you should touch the feet of the spiritual master, so I wanted to do that because I figured I may never get the chance again to see Srila Prabhupada. I hadn't seen him before, and very old, and I'd lived here in Canada, so I might never see him again. So Srila Prabhupada walked down there along with a couple of sannyasis, and the sannyasi had told us a little while before that don't try to touch Srila Prabhupada's feet, that they said he'll hit you with his cane, or you might trip him, or we'll hit you with our dandas if you do. And but I was thinking, well, I should really do this. So Srila Prabhupada must have knew my mind, because Srila Prabhupada stopped right in front of me, and he just stood there right in front of me, and so I reached out with both hands, and I very firmly pressed into his lotus feet. And I remember how cool and soft they were. And then I touched my head, and then Srila Prabhupada had a little smile and walked on, and back out the door and back to his apartment.
So he was in at the Ratha Yatra in Golden Gate Park. So I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So I ended up going, I took a friend of mine with me to the Golden Gate Park to see Srila Prabhupada. I can't remember if I took a plane, if we drove, if I hitchhiked there. I was 23, 24. So I remember the first time, then I see Srila Prabhupada up on the stage. And what really kind of impressed me was, I'm watching him. I actually helped put the big Vyasasana on the stage. And so Srila Prabhupada's there, and an Indian devotee, different devotees were giving him garlands and he was accepting, but an Indian devotee had a garland made out of plastic with money, all money in it. And he wanted to give Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, every time he tried to make eyes with Prabhupada, Prabhupada was turning his head. He didn't want that. So he knew this was really frustrating the Indian devotee. So Prabhupada looked, and you could tell he was like giving his mercy to the guy. He said, okay, and the devotee put, I don't know if it was $100 bills or dollar bills, So it stuck in my mind, the realization that Prabhupada wasn't there just for simply money. And not only was he accepted it because he wanted to benefit the person that was trying to give the money, making a show, and give Prabhupada the money. And he did that to receive it. And I got that realization that Prabhupada was doing him a favor by receiving that money garland. So that was my first understanding that Prabhupada was the real deal. He wasn't just trying to get money or be a big show-off. He was very present in his understanding of transcendental knowledge of Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada came to New York. He was in Henry Street, 1972. He was initiating 10 disciples a day for a week. So there were 7 initiations, and I was about in the middle of that week. And we came and we sat down, men facing one side, women facing the other side. And we were told to, when it's your turn to approach Srila Prabhupada, you stand up and you approach from your left side. You offer your obeisances on his right side, on your left side. That is the etiquette. And when he offers you your japamala, you do not reach with your left hand, you reach with your right hand. So I came up, I was extremely nervous. In one sense, I could say I was really not qualified. I mean, to follow these principles was almost like, how did I think that I was ready? But I got the mercy. So I reached for the beads with my left hand, and Srila Prabhupada retracted the beads. And now my anxiety level is on a factor of 10. I reached again, and he retracted them. And then he turned to one of his servants. It could have been Nitai, Prajumna. They were both there. Srila Prabhupada said, tell him. So they explained, you have to reach with your right hand. So I reached with my right hand, and then he took the beads and placed them into my hand. And I was actually praying to him, please do not ask me to cite the 4 regulative principles, because that will be too much for me, and I'll make a total fool of myself, and it will not make a good public presentation. He never asked me. All the other initiates that day were asked to recite the regulative principles. And I was so grateful for his compassion upon me. I felt like he understood, he could see that I was struggling with this simple thing, left hand and right hand. But he didn't ask me. So like 20 years later, 30 years later, I made a Vyas Puja homage, and I tell this story, and then I recite the 4 regulative principles in my Vyas Puja homage. I said, better late than never. And I certainly owe this, because this is part of the contract that you and I are making. I acknowledge what you were asking of me, because I'm saying it to you. I'm making a public statement. I'm making a statement before the deities, before the Vaishnavas, and before the Guru. So it's an important part of the initiation. So I felt like over time, you can see that I'm a little more relaxed, and I was able to incorporate that and make that into my offering.
Then a couple of weeks later, Radha Prabhu, who was the manager also of the press, the whole operation, he told me that on the morning walk, he had said to Prabhupada, there's one Mataji who is typing day and night. She hardly stops. And Prabhupada said, yes, she is running on spiritual energy. Of course, he told me later it was me that he was referring to. But, of course, we know that all of us were running on Prabhupada's spiritual energy, just trying to fulfill his desire, you know. The impossible was possible.
Because when he arrived at the temple, there was devotees from all over Latin America, you know, Central America, from Argentina, Brazil, even devotees from Canada. A few from Europe, they came. It was packed, so many devotees, big kirtan. One devotee is supposed to announce that Prabhupada was coming, arriving, you know, the limousine, blow the conch shell to everybody's signal, you know. He forgot. He was so excited, Prabhupada is coming, he forgot. So the devotees at the entrance of the temple, in the lines of the devotees, the ladies throwing flower petals, rose wire and Prabhupada fanning. So he arrived to the temple room, pay obeisance to the deities, his Vyasa-san. So we wash his lotus feet, Panchambrita, you know. He gave a lecture, arrival lecture. He said he liked very much this temple. He says the only temple in the world other than India and Lucknow, that the reception was so nice, he was so happy. The police scoring him, you know. He doesn't have to go through customs, immigrations, because he doesn't like that, you know, traveling so many times. And he said, I like it very much. I like this temple, it was so nice. Please keep reading my books. It will take you 25 years to read my books. He said, yes, to read. So everybody in ecstasy, so short arrival lecture, Prabhupada gave, he going to his room, you know. So it's the steps, going to his room, the kirtan is going on. So he go to his room, like the door, but the GVC at that time, he comes out, Prabhupada's calling and says, stop the kirtan, Prabhupada needs to rest. You know, and so goes in. So the temple president was there, he told me, so the Prabhupada told the GVC, why did you stop the kirtan? I said, Prabhupada, because I thought you need to rest, you know, that the voice can be quiet. He said, no, I can take rest with kirtan. Tell them to continue. And Prabhupada wants the kirtan, Prabhupada wants the kirtan. The GBC said again, all the voice, so many mirdangas and big kirtan, you know, the temple, the hall is like a big dome, you know, a lot of echo. It's huge kirtan. So I realized that Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada was so attached to the kirtan and to the Maha Mantra. That's a sign, I realized later, you know, the Prabhupada likes kirtan so much all the time, you know, he smile, some of the voice kirtan, and his kirtans too.
Srila Prabhupada went to Venezuela because of our book distribution. We did books in gas stations and truck stops. They left us in the road, the woman, whatever. Sometimes the whole day in a truck stop. I got on the truck stop, the whole book has to go, and all the BTGs if we were on a truck stop. We only ate peanuts and dates, like as if every day. But we did the books because we wanted Prabhupada to come, and he was the only country, Caracas, Venezuela, that Srila Prabhupada came from Mexico City because of our book distribution. We did so good, and we're proud of it. And some people went to India for free because of, you know, that, you know, so yeah, that's an amazing story, actually.
I led the Guru Puja Kirtan one morning. I don't remember which one, probably was there for, I think, 3 days. And so I got to lead the Guru Puja Kirtan. Anyway, I got to. I was somehow or other. So I didn't want to make a hash of it. I tried my best. Of course, no one could have cared anything about me and my kirtan leading. All eyes were on Srila Prabhupada. But then I noticed that Prabhupada himself was completely disinterested in the worship he was being given. It was almost like he was, he suffered to let us worship him. Because the last thing he was concerned about was receiving worship. It appeared to me that he was simply accepting worship as a matter of duty. And on that, but he was very, very grave during the entire Guru Puja to him. He would have, I think if he could have been somewhere else, probably he was somewhere else. But he was completely uninterested in being worshipped. So that was a big realization for me. I'm trying to, I don't know what I was trying to lead the kirtan, impress my spiritual master. It's ridiculous. So many things are going through my mind. But I could see Prabhupada was completely detached. So this was a great, great realization.
So it's 1976, and I've been a devotee only for about 8 or 9 months initiated, and we're at the Mayapur festival. And of course we're seeing Prabhupada every day in classes, and it's really wonderful, but I'm feeling a little bit like I haven't had a chance really to be with Prabhupada. And so I'm sitting outside, there's only one building at the time, and on the veranda where Prabhupada has his room, I'm hanging out there with a friend of mine, Drishta Maharaj, and a few other devotees whose names I can't remember now. But there are maybe 4 or 5 of us there, and we're outside of Prabhupada's room, and we're just thinking, maybe there's a chance we'll be able to see Prabhupada. Well, at one point, Drishta Maharaj, who is a little more senior, he said, let's just go see Prabhupada. And he, somehow or other, I didn't even know who he talked to, he got us in, and we went right in to see Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada sitting at the low desk in his room, and he's just there, and he's very casual, as he is in India so often. And we all sit down, pay our obeisances, and he smiles, a big radiant smile, and I'm thinking, I'm only 8 feet away from my Gurudev. And I'm looking there, and Prabhupada's, Drishta Maharaj says, well, these are some boys from the Radha Damodar party, and Prabhupada's written out and says, oh yes, very nice. and we're ready to maybe hear something from him. And just at that moment, maybe 1 minute, somehow or other, his personal servant, he brings in a couple, Bengali couple, and Prabhupada knows them, and he says, and he starts speaking Bengali to them, and they get into a very animated conversation. And I'm watching Prabhupada, and I'm thinking, here's Prabhupada talking, and I can't understand, and he's lively, and he's big smile, and he's animated, and Drishta Maharaj is kind of thinking, well, maybe we should leave. So Drishta Maharaj gets up and he's going to say, Prabhupada, we're going to leave. And Prabhupada immediately, he's very, very concerned with us. He says, no, please stay, please stay. And this is, I'll never forget this. He said, it is beneficial, please stay. Because it's beneficial for us to get the association of the pure devotee. We never know when you're going to get the association of a pure devotee ever again in this life. So Prabhupada knew that this was our chance. So we sat there. And I just remember watching him speaking this way, looking at us, big smile, his hands. I noticed, because I couldn't understand the words, I was looking at him sort of just at his features, his kurta, which was silk, and his bright face. And I was thinking, this is so fortunate that Prabhupada is so kind to let us be there. So we were there for maybe 15 minutes. And I heard Krishna, Chaitanya. Didn't matter. I didn't have to hear the words. I was with the Guru. And after about 15 minutes, something else came up, and he said he had some other business. We paid our obeisances and we left. And when we got outside, Drishta Maharaj said, so what did you think? And I said, well, it was a wonderful experience that I could be with my Guru so close for that amount of time. And I'm eternally grateful for that mercy that Prabhupada showed us.
So in 1975, in the summer when he came, when Srila Prabhupada came, there was a small house program at one of the Indian congregational members' home. And during that time, my father was sitting right next to Srila Prabhupada at the end of the talk. And Prabhupada asked my father, he said, Yash, why do you think, he's heard that there's 40 or 50,000 Indians in the Toronto area. Why do you think that they don't come to the temple or participate in the Harinams? And my father said, well, Srila Prabhupada, I think it's because there's a lot of discrimination. At that time, there was a lot of discrimination against the Indians. They were called Pakis, and they would say, Paki, go home. And so he felt, my father said, he felt that people were afraid to dress in the dhoti, kurta, and saris, and chant out in the streets in a forceful way, and also be of color. So that would just aggravate the situation. So he said, well, Prabhupada, I think it would be better if people, dressed in regular Western clothes and not be so pushy, like outward preaching, and then maybe people would, come. Prabhupada said, and I'm paraphrasing, the disease is strong, so the medicine must be strong. So we can't compromise there. What I learned from my father's exchange with Srila Prabhupada was that Prabhupada is uncompromising. So he would rather have less disciples and devotees coming to the less members from the community coming, rather than to water it down and have a lot more coming to the temple. So I felt like he wanted to maintain his standards, and he wasn't about to compromise the philosophy or how things were done since Lord Chaitanya's time. And secondly, I learned that Prabhupada's mode of management was not just authoritarian. It was not authoritarian. He actually asked for feedback from others, their opinions and their ideas. But then he was very astute at analyzing and could come up with a conclusion that was perfect for every situation. So his power analysis was very astute, and that was evident in all his interactions, I felt.
So when once we went for a walk with Srila Prabhupada in Portland, Oregon, after my initiation, we went to the redwood forest where there's giant trees so big you can drive through them. And Srila Prabhupada didn't speak on the walk, except for one time he was walking with all the sannyasis and temple presidents, etc., and myself and a young bhakta had just 2 weeks in the movement had come along, and Srila Prabhupada stopped at one large tree, and he picked up his cane. He said, "How old that tree?" He's shaking his cane. He said, and one person said 1,000 years, and somebody said 500, and Prabhupada said 1,000 years. That's a long time to stand up naked. That's a punishment for being lustful. And he put down his cane and walked on, but then he wheeled around, and the bhakta was right behind him, and she said to him, "You would like to be a tree?" And the bhakta said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, yes." He's nodding his head enthusiastically. I remember Tamal Krishna Goswami was whispering, "Who brought this guy along?" And we were all very tense. Everybody was looking about, and Srila Prabhupada looking about, and Srila Prabhupada rolled his eyes a little bit, but he turned around, walked down, but the bhakta still nodding his head, And the devotees were very sincere. The youngest, from the young to the old, we were very sincere. And Srila Prabhupada was much older than us, and much. We were all much in awe of him. But Srila Prabhupada tolerated all types of devotees. Were all kind of equal, actually, because he was taking us all back to Godhead. And so Srila Prabhupada gave us association to young and old, and it was wonderful to get association. You should probably go from town to town, city to city, all around the world, associating with the devotees.
Besides having my hand slapped by Srila Prabhupada, my other great claim to fame is that I was disturbing one of his lectures. At that time in the Dham Temple, now the kitchen is at the other end of the building. But at that time, we just moved in. The kitchen was, there was the temple room, and then you went through a door, there was a pantry, and then you went into the kitchen. And there was no door on the kitchen itself. There was a door between the temple and the pantry. So Prabhupada is lecturing. Oh, well, everybody and his brother and his Prabhu was in the kitchen helping cook. This was not the Sunday feast, but I was the head cook in Atlanta at that time. So there were so many devotees in there cooking and doing and chopping and doing so many things. And then Srila Prabhupada came from his quarters to the temple, and I was alone. Preparing prasadam, 300-400 devotees. But anyway, that's a side issue. So this is a 2-for-1. I was by myself in the kitchen, and there were 300 or 400 devotees sitting, a few feet away, and Srila Prabhupada himself was sitting about 30 feet away, but on the other side of a closed door. And I was listening to Prabhupada lecture on the speaker through the inner temple. He was speaking into a microphone, and I was hearing him. And I realized at that time that there's no difference between Prabhupada and his speaking or his books, because even though I was not able to actually see Prabhupada, I was able to hear him and understand his point. So this was a great realization for me. It confirmed It solidified my understanding of that basic principle of Krishna consciousness, is that Prabhupada is in his Vani, not only in his Vapu, and his Vani is permanent.
So Prabhupada on his tour from Golden Gate Park Ratha Yatra to Berkeley Temple to New Dwarka Temple, now he was going to a little closer to where I was staying at the time, to Laguna Beach Temple. Okay, so I go in there, you know, my hair's a little long. I probably had, you know, bell bottoms or whatever on. I didn't have my dhoti and Sika. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and it's kind of everybody's talking to everybody, and I'm sitting there 3 rows from the back. The Vyasa-san's up on a little stage. Next thing I know, I look over and I see Srila Prabhupada entering the room. And he looks around and he says, "Please believe me. Please believe me." Now I'm like, my jaw has dropped. And nobody can hear this because there's a lot of background noise. And he's not on the Vyasa-san with his microphone. And he says, "You must believe in Govinda. You must believe in Krishna." And he sat down on the Vyasa-san. And still, there was a lot of noise and stuff going on. I was even like, you know, looking at Prabhupada and still kind of like looking at what's going on. And he said, "Women in the back," in the microphone, "women in the back." As soon as he said that, it was very, very quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And the women walked in the back. But it's not so much that women are inferior, it's just that everyone was agitated and no one was really paying attention to him. And you know, he's Krishna's main devotee.
As far as qualities, what stands out to me is Srila Prabhupada's forgiveness, coupled with compassion, of course, but when I think about it, in fact, I wrote a Vyas Puja offering a couple of years ago on this meditation, that here I am, countless births in this material world, turning my back on Krishna, born into this world repeatedly with envy and hate for Krishna. And Krishna is Prabhupada's most beloved object. And here I am, practically his enemy, Krishna's enemy, or competitor. And yet, he, in his old age, endured so much suffering, went totally beyond his comfort zone to come and rescue me from my foolish attempt to imitate his beloved Krishna and usurp his position, you know. It just really underlines his ability, his willingness to forgive and extend his compassion to see the suffering that obviously devoid of Krishna, it's just a life of suffering and repeated lives. And still he did that despite criticism by his godbrothers of his innovative ways, you know, that he introduced to spread and to collect these, all the suffering souls, you know.
The second time, 1975, when my mother got to see Srila Prabhupada, because she never saw him. So when I went to see her to give a prasadam, I said, "So, Mom, what do you think about my spiritual teacher?" Because she got to see him, you know, the kirtan, the lecture, and everything, prasadam. She was already getting purified with prasadam. She said, "This man, he's a holy person. He's a holy man," right away. So I noticed she was impacted by Prabhupada's presence and potency, like all of us. And he's a holy man, holy person. So after, sometimes I used to visit my mother. One time she was traveling some Europe somewhere. So I went to her bedroom and I saw Bhagavad Gita and the Bible together. Says she got purified. And she wrote a poem from Prabhupada, and she liked Prabhupada very much. She became totally attached to Prabhupada until the last days, you know.
In November of 1972, Srila Prabhupada sent a letter to Kurukshetra Das, the president of Denver, listing the 10 devotees that could receive Brahmin initiation, including myself. And in this letter, Prabhupada spoke about book distribution to Kurukshetra Das. He said that, I am very glad to hear the good news, especially as you want to sell books more and more. That is the best preaching work. Each book sold means there is some practical effect of preaching. There is some tangible progress. So try to sell books as many as possible in your country, and in this way, so long as you remain active, but not for your personal sense of gratification, so long the movement will be successful without any doubt. As soon as someone wants to satisfy his own senses, then he fails at everything. We are the only movement in the world which is preaching the real fact or secret to success, and outside of our movement, everything else will fail. So try to convince people to join us and be successful in their life, and that will be to your credit.
As I said previously, the Vyasa-san was just about 30 feet from where I was standing, doing my service in the kitchen. And this was on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Vyasa Puja Day. So there was a big separate Vyasa-san that got built higher than Prabhupada's Vyasa-san. And Prabhupada personally was offering arti to his spiritual master on that day. So, of course, I was in the kitchen listening to the Vyasa Puja lecture and other things. But when the kirtan started, and I opened the door. All I had to do was walk 20 feet, open the door, and I was standing right directly behind Srila Prabhupada. And if I'd been in the temple room, I never would have got such a view. I've never seen anything of that grace and devotion anywhere at any time, and it's one of the things that just is permanently embedded in my mind. The concentration, the devotion, and the gratitude, and just these sweeping arcs from offering the different articles of the puja articles, so grand, majestic, and so really filled with complete devotion and love. So it's really astonishing. And then Prabhupada offered the conch shell with water, and he went to put the water in something, and no one had provided anything to put the water in. So Prabhupada was looking around, talked to one of the, then he just took the conch shell and he just flung the water, and it just went out in a stream into Tulsi Devi's pot. It was, I mean, it's who can do such a thing? This is unimaginable to me. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Well, in 1977, I went to India, and we went to Mayapur first, and Srila Prabhupada was there, and he became ill. I saw him brought in they were carrying him down the stairs in a chair. He has sunglasses and things. I had given Prabhupada a nice picture of Lord Katamsha at that time, 8x10, and another Maharaji had given Srila Prabhupada a knitted chadar that she made. And Srila Prabhupada, he took it, but he immediately gave it to someone else. And the mother went over to Brahmananda Swami and expressed that she was very upset by that because she wanted Prabhupada to have it. And Brahmananda said that you gave it, that's enough. Srila Prabhupada accepted it. Now it's his to do what he likes with it. And he often gives things away that he receives because he only keeps what he needs.
So now, a couple of days later, Prabhupada is going to San Diego. So I'm back in Lucadia, where I had a little restaurant, Chaitanya's Tea House. Oh, good. Probably there's going to be a big festival in Balboa Park. Okay? Very famous place in San Diego, Balboa Park. So now I take my friend and we're going to go to Balboa Park to see Srila Prabhupada and eat prasadam, chant, a big festival, right? So I go to Balboa Park and we arrive there and there's nobody there. There's one brahmachari in the whole area, the festival field. There was the stage with the cover with those nice Indian decorations all on the side. The stage is about 6 feet tall. There was a couple of smaller tents that were going to end up being prasadam tents. So I'm walking in, I see a brahmachari there, was kind of keeping an eye on everything. And I said, oh, hey, where's the festival? He said, oh, there'll be a festival pretty soon. So I said, well, where's the prasadam? Because everyone knows I like prasadam. So he said, oh, it'll happen. It'll be pretty soon. So while I'm talking to this brahmachari, after about 5 minutes, all of a sudden I look over and guess what? Srila Prabhupada is entering up on the stage. And he walks up on the stage. There's nobody there but one brahmachari and me and my friend who I went to Balboa Park to see the festival. Now Prabhupada walks up on the stage and I'm with my mouth open looking and he sits in the Vyasasan and he has five big men with him, right? I'm not going to mention their names. Sitting on smaller pillows to his left. 5 little pillows, and they're all very famous sannyasis and so forth. So they're sitting there. Now I'm like watching all this, and they all settle in for a minute, and all of a sudden I realized that Prabhupada is staring directly at me, who's standing about 30 feet in front of the stage, the only me and 2 other people there, and he's staring directly at us, and I'm like, I felt like deer in the headlights, okay? So I look around and I saw a mridangam and I said to the brahmachari, can you play that mridangam? And he said, yes. And I said, can you play kirtan? Now here I am, karmi looking guy. And I said, can you play chant, lead chant? He said, yes. So the brahmachari comes up, Nama Om, he's playing a mridangam. Now I'm chanting Nama Om Vishnupadaya, and I raise my hands and I close my eyes and I start dancing, and I realized Prabhupada's still looking directly at us, and I'm chanting in front of Prabhupada. Now I start to pass out on my feet, and I have to keep catching myself from falling, and I'm dancing and I'm wavering and I'm falling and I'm trying to, and I'm thinking, oh my God, please, I don't want to act like an idiot in front of Srila Prabhupada, right? And I'm chanting Hare Krishna, and I'm nice stepping, and I'm like, I'm catching myself halfway before I fall down, and I'm jerking around, and I open my eyes and I see Prabhupada's like looking right at us. There's only 3 of us there, 25, 30 feet in front of the stage. All the other sannyasis are there. So I'm like, Prabhupada saw I was distressed. So Prabhupada, again, in the mic, looks at the sannyasis on the side and says, kind of in a rough voice, get up. He said, get up. And I was like, oh my God. So I kept dancing and chanting and had my eyes closed. Every once in a while I open my eyes and I see. So the sannyasis, maybe I shouldn't say, they kind of reluctantly got up and they were there, and I don't know why they felt like that, but they did. And so anyway, I'm still, dancing. I kind of got a smile on my face. I'm looking at Prabhupada, and he's acknowledging that we're chanting and dancing, and he wanted them to join the kirtan, and it was a natural thing, kirtan party in front of the guru. So then he says, and still now, I'm still, you know, falling and not often, but yeah, quite a bit, you know. I mean, you could see I was like struggling to stay on my feet, and I was really under heavy pressure, Prabhupada there, and I was like, you know, amazed. So then he says in a mic again, he looks over at them and says, in a rough voice, dance. He says, dance. I was like, oh my God. So then they were all kind of like doing the sannyasi shuffle. It really was, I got to admit, it wasn't a wholehearted, like I was in ecstasy seeing Srila Prabhupada chanting, you know, and they were just like, you know, oh yeah, okay, you know, they were like that, I don't know why. And now Prabhupada was pretty angry at them, and I was kind of cracking up, I was smiling. When I saw Prabhupada was angry at them, for some reason I was smiling. So that was my nice pastime with Srila Prabhupada, was acknowledging that we were doing Harinam for him in front of him, and he was accepting that nice little offering of Harinam for him.
We went to a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. So he's walking, this big park. He went the first time in Mexico City, he liked that park, 3 blocks away from the temple, nice park, big. Our temple was a very prestigious neighborhood. It used to be an embassy. And all the other embassies of the world are right after the park. And even the house of the president of the country, he lives there. Like the White House, but the Mexico president live in the same park at the end. So Prabhupada used to like to walk in that place. So we are in the Avenue of the Poets, and there's a statue of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. He looked at it, and he keep walking. He didn't say anything. So keep walking, and Prabhupada, it was a container, you know, of trash, but in Spanish, said put the trash in the right place, in Spanish, you know. Prabhupada said, what does it say then? So we translate it, keep walking. Said the whole world should be in the trash, should be there in the garbage container. So, and then he keep walking, and he said, to turn to us, who is looking at us, he said, all of you, because you're from this country, you have to preach to the intellectual class of people, because they're the leaders of the society, the intelligent class of people. That makes sense. So it's like Prabhupada's wishes become fulfilled, you know. We start preaching to intellectual class of people, politicians, famous people, professors, so like that. So before that, when Prabhupada arrived in Mexico City second time, he asked for security, 24 hours, 24/7 security. I don't know why. So we formed a group, a team, so I was part of that. So I was in the balcony, his rooms, in the balcony, you can see through the doors, it's only translucent curtains, and you can see Prabhupada, his rooms. So I was there, you know, that was my place in the balcony, and I got to see Prabhupada, how he was talking to the devotees, room conversations, preaching to intellectual class of people, professors, you know, famous people, and how he was eating his prasadam, drinking, very aristocratic, you know, and eating prasadam. Impressed me the whole thing, because I got to see the Prabhupada was eating a little bit like a real Goswami, you know, like a real yogi. I always thought that Prabhupada was a great yogi. And of course, finally later, you know, what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, you know, from all the yogis, Bhakti yogis, the Tatmos, in Prabhupada, we know he's represented the whole parampara, you know. So the way he ate a little bit and drinking and sleeping impressed me, surprised me, because he's a real Goswami, my God, like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Prabhupada, eating a little bit and sleeping a little bit, because I was in the night, because the body is supposed to substitute me, to replace me for my ship. He never showed up, he fell asleep. So I stayed there the whole night. But it was Krishna's arrangement, because I got to see the Prabhupada went to sleep around, turn off the lights at 10:30 at night, that day. And then ring the bell, call Sruti Kirti, his servant, personal servant, around 2:30 in the morning. So I said, 10:30, you know, counting how many hours. So Prabhupada went to the bathroom, so I followed, you know, because security. And Prabhupada said, what are you doing? Who are you? Paying my obeisances. And Prabhupada, I'm part of the security, you know, my broken English, you know. I'm part of the security, Srila Prabhupada, I'm trying to serve you. He said, oh, that's very nice, thank you very much. You know, he kept going to the bathroom. I thought he's going to just have to go the nature call and go back to sleep. No, but he just put on the lights and called Kirti. Ring the bell. He came, set up his dictaphone, his book, his glasses, start translating with it. I said, oh my God, I thought he was going to go to sleep, but he's working. That time I didn't know Prabhupada's schedule, but I was so amazed and impressed. Only a few hours sleeping, eating a little bit. Oh my God. So I was so surprised, so amazed how little he eat, how little he sleep, and how hard he was working, preaching, traveling, preaching, and enlivening the devotees and preaching to the devotees and giving a lecture every day, every evening, And then I was so amazed to see Prabhupada like that. Everything in his life impressed me, impacted me. And then he said, everything is in my books, read my books. So I have no doubt no doubt.
In Denver, Srila Prabhupada enjoyed relaxing with the devotees. Often he would have darshans. In the evening, he would generally sit on the porch in a rocking chair, and people would be crowding on the porch or even on the lawn down a few steps below. And Srila Prabhupada would laugh and talk to guests and devotees. And during the day, he would often relax and speak in the backyard of the house. And they were pretty small backyards. There was a big tree that probably would lean back like this, and he would laugh and smile and talk very casually with the devotees. So I was at one where the yard was full up with the sannyasis and temple presidents and elder devotees, etc. And everyone crowding around Srila Prabhupada. But the women were all next door. So all the men had come into the yard, and the women had gone to the next yard over behind a big steel fence, and they were all pressing against the fence, trying to see and hear Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada looked over there and he said, "Come on then, come on." And so they all went around and came in the yard, and Srila Prabhupada told his men to all move back and make some room. The women must sit up here up front. So we all did that because Srila Prabhupada was very equal with everyone. He gave a lot of mercy to the young women, and as well as women and children, and were treated just as well as the men were. It was the men who had the doubts about these things, but Srila Prabhupada was not like that. He was always very happy to see everyone.
I think if the feeling like a father, like so many fathers we had, Srila Prabhupada gave the perfect instruction so we can live and perfectly well. So his father love to us. We are his disciples and great-grand disciples, different devotees, but I see him and I treat him when in the temple too, like a father. Like, let me make sure, a story of Jamuna too, actually. Make sure he's warm, make sure he's an older man. He took care of us so much. He gave us so much. So I see him like we have to attend what he wants, and he just asks us to follow 4 principles only. And don't do this, don't. Bad chant. So that's father giving good advice. Don't do this, don't do that. Typical father is going to say, you're going to get burned, obviously. It's Kali Yuga, we're going to get burned. He's telling us to don't. We probably still touch the fire, but he still take us back. Why? Because he's our father. It's not that we're going to abuse, but he is our father, so, he will teach us eternally. Eternally. He's Jagat Guru. He's our father. So I think that's what I feel. I have a Didya, Srila Prabhupada, just like the one in the temple. He's about that big, and every night I cover him, I change his cups, I put a garland, I do, I'll tell Prabhupada, oh my gosh, it's 3 hours later. It's okay. He's the father. He forgives. How many things we did to our dad, and the dad is okay. Chastise us a little bit. Prabhupada told us. He put his voice strong, but he's a father. He has to do that. He's my father. Yeah, he's my father.
I always felt like Prabhupada is mine, I'm his, And he can make me dance as he likes. And I have 100% faith in him that he is my spiritual father and capable of taking me back to Godhead and engaging me appropriately. And I've always felt throughout my life that his hand is there to guide me.
When I read the Bhagavad Gita, it was like the first time I ever understood anything. It spoke to me. It was like I would struggle through other kind of philosophies. I would think I knew something. But when I actually read the Bhagavad Gita, it was all of a sudden like this person telling me, this is the truth, I have the truth, and you should hear from me. And as I said earlier when I talked about it, I first saw Prabhupada, I would fix myself when I was reading the books. I would go to the page where I'd look at his picture and I'd say, he's like the ultimate Buddha. He's like the ultimate guru. I would look at his face and I would think he's different than every other guru I've ever seen. I couldn't describe it exactly. But to me, it was just a different quality. So that when I saw Prabhupada, it was like the books were the only books that ever really touched me. To this day, I look back and I think I was struggling trying to understand anything. And it was only by the fact that I got Prabhupada's books that Prabhupada directly spoke to me. So it's his mercy. And I know, I was just a Kali Yuga dullard, but Prabhupada opened my heart. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyanan Gyanan Shalakaya Chakshu Militan Gyanan Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. I couldn't have seen without Prabhupada. So it's Prabhupada's merciful glance upon me that allowed me to become Krishna conscious that I appreciate. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada's compassion was just so amazing for every single person, every living entity. It didn't matter what the situation was. His compassion for everyone to give them Krishna, to help them progress in their spiritual journey. It was amazing. And even now, you can feel Srila Prabhupada's compassion. You know, reading his books, just praying to him. It's just his compassion for us is amazing. And it's probably one of the things that's kept me here. You know, all these years, somehow or another, I'm still here. And yeah, it's definitely Srila Prabhupada that's kept me here.
There was one, how do you say, alternative lifestyle person there who was friends with Balavanta Prabhu. He and his wife they had a restaurant before Balavanta joined the movement. They were involved. I used to eat there all the time when I was living in Atlanta before I joined. So they came to the temple, and so the personality who was later to be initiated as Parampara Das asked Srila Prabhupada, "Who is Mayor Baba?" Prabhupada said, "I do not know. There are so many bogus Babas." Of course, it was perfect. It was just, all right. And then, of course, the other thing that Prabhupada was asked, one of the book distributors asked Prabhupada in an evening discussion question, Prabhupada, what pleases you the most? Prabhupada, to which everyone was on pins and needles, that you love Krishna. So that was a very, how do you say, it was a weighted question, I guess a freighted question. And Prabhupada gave perfect answers to everything. Prabhupada always had perfect answers to all questions. So many times Prabhupada's answers were to the effect of, don't make such a big deal out of everything. Chant Hare Krishna, love Krishna, read the books, you know, jump in kirtan, take prasadam, and your problems are over. It's not complicated. Don't make it complicated.
So the other thing that makes me impress my life, two more things. One astrologer in Miami, friend of mine that I met him, he's famous, has TV programs. That was in Prabhupada Centennial, 1996. He says, Prabhupada is going to be recognized in the future like a saintly person, a holy man who saved the world, the human race. It came in a very short time. It saved the whole world, you know, and only few people recognize him. And the rest of the world ignore him. But in the future, the whole world is going to recognize him. You know, and it's true, Prabhupada, in 11 years what he did, it was amazing, you know, all over the world. You know, like he comes to New York alone, only rupees in his pocket and the books, you know. But and then, 1976, the big famous Ratha Yatra in New York, you know, Fifth Avenue, 3 big chariots, devotees from all over the world, you know, thousands of the world. And Fifth Avenue, like Prabhupada says, the most important avenue in the world, the most important city in the world. Prabhupada's there with 3 big chariots, you know, like a big emperor, you know, conquering with Krishna consciousness. Same thing in London, no, conquer the British Empire with Ratha Yatra. And he says in one lecture, you want to preach, you want to impress the cities, do Ratha Yatras. So with sannyasis all over the world, you know, disciples from all over the world. That's amazing what Prabhupada accomplished, you know what I mean? Create a whole revolutionary movement all over the world. Single-handedly, he managed, administrated, you know, all over the world. That's what impressed me with Prabhupada the most, everything. His great personality, Paramahansa, Satyavesha Avatar, you know. That's Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada was unstoppable. Every day, every moment, every ounce of his energy was focused into spreading and establishing the Hare Krishna movement. And that he would go from one temple, fly halfway around the world, and do it all over again and again and again. Just totally dedicated to the order of his Guru Maharaj. And that I just find so inspiring. I love Satsuru Maharaj's, the title of the first book, A Lifetime in Preparation. He had all of this, he meditated upon the society, he thought through it, and then he came and he executed it. And then in the short amount of time, what he accomplished was inconceivable. And I see generations coming, generations and more generations coming. People are taking to Krishna consciousness. And I just feel that what he started, what he brought, his empowerment was totally awesome.
Yeah, one time a devotee, while we were living in Mayapur, asked me, what is it about Prabhupada that stands out for you? And as I was thinking then too, I thought, you know, he had no personal motive in all that he did, which is obvious in everything that I do. In other words, no desire for profit, adoration, or distinction. For profit, he had no motive to gain anything personally. Adoration, in fact, he did things that people derided, you know, some, right? And what, distinction? He clearly wasn't looking for distinction, as many other yogis would name their movement by their name. But he gave Krishna the distinction. You know, he was distinct from Krishna very clearly. Krishna is God, and broadcast the glories of Krishna. So he named the movement the Hare Krishna movement. Yeah, this no motive, whereas I could see in myself, and there's always something that it's a disgusting anartha, you know, really. So that's another admirable quality of Srila Prabhupada, outstanding.
What stood out for me most about Prabhupada's qualities is his compassion and love. I mean, especially because I only had limited association with Prabhupada during the Guru Puja, just seeing how he brought the excitement and enthusiasm. The devotees would be jumping with great enthusiasm, and then all the children would come for the cookies, and how Prabhupada took great happiness and pride to give the cookies to all the children. And I just felt that this is compassion, this is love. It's not something that's just some artificial routine worship or some kind of ritualistic ceremony. This is something which actually he's bringing the excitement and bringing the energy and love out of the devotees by his mercy and compassion. Although he had a very serious demeanor, he looked very sober, but then he would smile as an ocean. Then you'd feel, oh, yes, this is my father, my grandfather, my teacher, the person who's my savior, and giving me something of substance. And Prabhupada was just, no nonsense, but then he just loved a good joke, and he loved to smile and give like an ocean of, happiness. So that I just felt that I was looking for happiness. I was looking for what is the purpose, what is the goal, and this is the person who's going to give it.